You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 368 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin. He's high atop Wrigleyville tonight via telephone. How's it going, Pat?
It's going all right, Jeremy. I apologize that you can't get my speaker to work correctly, but I won't hold it against you despite your technological alleged expertise.
Yes, we need to get our we need to get rolling. We need to get the show going. It's been too long since we've had a podcast. We've got a guest on standby. We can't have him waiting. We will get this resolved in time for the start of the regular season, guaranteed. We will have this for the next time.
When are you coming to my house to fix it, Jeremy?
Yes,
because you've been here several times recently, and you haven't done. I didn't realize it was broken. So
yes, we will get it resolved. We will enjoy a couple of adult beverages, and the next time we talk, we will be doing our annual prediction show with friend of the podcast, Evan Altman. We'll be talking about actual games that happened between the Cubs and Dodgers in Japan. We've got a lot to cover before we get to that, though. We've got all kinds of spring training has happened since last we podcasted. And to help us discuss all things Cubs, to help us get ready for the start of actual Cubs regular season baseball, which is shockingly only 12 days away from the time of this recording. Welcome back to the podcast. Longtime friend of the show. You know him from his work at NBC Chicago. James Neveau, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
I do appreciate my usual invite to the Jeremy Deemer commits technical malfeasance episodes of the show. It could have been better, could have been worse. Jeremy, you really do need to work on your people skills. That's all I'm going to say after witnessing all of that take place.
Do you remember in season 3 when I had to run an entire show by myself without you, Jeremy? Do you remember that episode?
The one episode with you and you.
Yeah.
I was in the one time
Mauricio and I had to do it alone, just the two of us.
Yeah, you and Mauricio had to do the podcast. I was in Disney World with my kids, and I literally sent pages of instructions with screenshots and all this.
He was so impressive, he got hired by the Cardinals after that podcast, I think.
That's right.
He ran himself out of town. That's remarkable work.
Well, let's get into some of the Cubs talk. We were talking in the pre-show, which I should have recorded that whole thing and put it up on the Patreon for all of our supporters there. But in the pre-show, we were discussing that this has been a pretty uneventful, pretty quiet spring training for the Cubs. We don't see a ton of not a ton of position battles. Just it has been delightful in the winter months here to turn on and see baseball, and like it gets me excited. I started to get really excited for the baseball season when the Kyle Tucker news broke, and then I think my levels of excitement are now at another all-time high watching some spring training baseball happening here, even though we're not watching a ton of position battles. But
I like it when the Cubs refused to lose for like a week and a half to start the spring training. It was kind of fun.
As we all know, that translates immediately to regular season success, right?
100%. No other option.
Carry that momentum. Yep, that's clearly what happens every time.
Yeah.
So what from what you've seen so far of spring training baseball, James? Anything jumping out at you so far this year ahead of the upcoming games in Japan?
Well, one of the snarky comments that I made was that we should all be panicking about Kyle Tucker and his 0 for 14 so far, even though we were repeatedly told before spring that he just never goes very hard during spring training and tries to save it all for the regular season. And I mean, looking at numbers, I'm not going to sit here and, badmouth his process. So other than that kind of tongue-in-cheek criticism, I think that the only things that have really been worth paying attention to, at least like initially for me, have been the battle at third base, because I think that it's kind of assumed at this point Matt Shaw was going to be the guy, but then he went and got hurt during spring training, had the oblique injury. Now you kind of have to wonder, like, is he going to go to Japan? Do the Cubs feel like he should stick around stateside and get more regular playing time in spring training? I think that's going to be an interesting question. And then I do think that Gage Workman kind of maybe forcing himself into that conversation, perhaps with the, caveat that if the Cubs don't have him on their big league roster, he could go back to, the Tigers or whatever. I think that he's really forcing that issue, which I have liked to see. So the third base thing I've been keeping an eye on. And then the only other one that has even risen above like the threshold of where I'm actually going to like pay attention to it, just the health of Nico Horner, because it just kind of adds another little wrinkle to the mix. We already know he's not going to be going to Japan, so the Cubs will have a different second baseman over there. But of course, the focus is just going to be getting him healthy and getting him ready for, the start of the stateside season. And so I think the only thing I've really paid any sort of like real attention to has been third base, and then a little bit on the Nico Horner front, just to make sure that, nothing terribly crazy happens, that his, leg didn't fall off or whatever the case may be.
I'm glad you have these questions, James, because I have the answers to each and every one of them. You ready?
Yep.
First, playing games in Japan in the middle of March is a bad idea because half the team's not going to be ready, including, as you pointed out, Nico Horner, who won't be there. Matt Shaw will not be there, I'm pretty sure. He might be there, but he's not going to play in the games. It's kind of a shame that they won't be able to start the season 2 weeks later certainly when we would hope that Matt Bush would be ready. As far as the struggles of Kyle Tucker or anyone else in spring training, I can only remind us all that I think it was just 4 years ago when Jason Hayward hit 7 home runs in spring training. So, enough said on that.
Enough said.
Famously a precursor to a career season, if I recall,
There was also the time 2 years ago when Hayden Wisniewski was nails in spring training. And then came out and as the fifth starter, because clearly he was ready to be at least a third starter, if not a number two, and then collapsed. And then we've got the Keegan Thompson example of somebody who was terrible in spring training and then came out for a month and was amazing and then was terrible again. And it kind of goes up and down. Like there's no real logic to any of this. So just to emphasize that point, I got the stats out today because stats are fun. Among players who have at least 20 plate appearances in spring training, which is a huge sample size, indicative of almost an entire career for most people. I looked at the OPS leaders, the on-base plus slugging percentage leaders, and I will tell you, it warmed my heart to see Michael Busch as the fourth best OPS of all major players so far this spring, which is a prelude to what, you ask? Well, I don't know, but seventh on the list is David Bowie. Third on the list is Jorge Soler. So, if it really means anything, I think the Cubs really did themselves a disservice, not a service, by trading for Busch and letting those two guys go. But of course, none of it means anything. So that's good.
No.
If it did, then Ben Cowles would make the team because he's eighth right now. And as with Nicky Lopez, who's 14th. I think he might have been 14th from the bottom last year when the games actually counted, right, when he was with the White Sox. But he's 14th right now. And going down the list, if you look at the people who are doing poorly, worse than Kyle Tucker is one Seiya Suzuki. So let me tell you, if Kyle Tucker and Seiya Suzuki are going to hit like they've hit so far in the first week and a half of spring training, the Cubs are destined to win maybe 60 games, 55 games. So you're looking at a 105-loss season probably.
Still 15 games more than the White Sox, I will point out.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Christian Franklin is 137th among big leaguers. He's so bad that he should just be unceremoniously cut probably, tonight at the Holiday Inn or wherever he's staying. So, yeah, I mean, these things are not necessarily indicative of anything. I would gladly take Ketel Marte or Marcus Semien or a number of players who are at the very bottom of the league right now in OPS as of this time. So I think spring training is a time to do two things. One, don't get hurt. Two, get healthy if you are hurt. and 3, get out there and limber up a little bit. I think with the pitching situation, as you said, there aren't really a lot of lineup issues other than who's going to have the last bench spot probably. But when it comes to the pitching, I could see if you're fighting for like one of the last bullpen spots, like Miller might be fighting, for one of those spots right now and has struggled so far in like all of 2 innings or something, because that's indicative of a career. That might have some implications, in terms of how fast you're throwing or what, whatever, I don't know, your control, who knows. But even that, I think Craig Counsell's been around the block. Not only has he been around the block, I saw today that he is the odds-on favorite among all major league managers to win Manager of the Year this year. Plus 400.
That's indicative of degenerate gamblers, and I think mostly Chicagoans putting money on it. But
a combination of that and the Cubs being so disappointing last year that people think there's nowhere they can go but up. I think, but
contraire, we know better.
So I think spring training is fun to watch. Like you said, it is nice just to watch guys out there and playing again. But I wouldn't take it seriously. If that's what people are worried about.
And there's no it's the last bench spot. It's the 5th starter when we already know they're going to keep, they're planning for 6 guys that can do this so Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, Colin Ray, those guys, they're going to have at least 6 guys here that could be starters on this team. So there's
don't run too hard. Don't hurt yourself.
Don't hurt yourself.
When I saw PCA tweaked his hamstring, whatever that meant, I was like, come on. And then the next day he hit it inside the park home run. So I feel like he's probably okay. What do you think? But certainly you don't want one of your regulars. Like you don't want Dansby Swanson to strain his rib cage, or for Ian Happ to break the bone in his hand while he's being hit with a pitch or something silly like that. That's going to cost him 6 weeks. At the beginning of the year. You want to make sure that Justin Steele and Imanaga and Teon and those guys are, get some innings in, but aren't like if there's a squib or a bunt towards third base, I don't want Justin Steele like diving after it. It's like whatever, let it go. Like just get out of the way and don't make any unusual movements.
The Cubs are playing their spring training games at Sloan Park, and we were discussing that James, you mentioned that they were planning to do some renovations at Sloan Park, which was surprising to all of us. That means that Sloan Park is over 10 years old. It opened in 2014. Unbelievable.
It's kind of unbelievable. Yeah, it was one of those things. I think. Yeah, Pat was just about to say he went the first year, I did too, and just the fact that when it opened, it honestly was just and it still is, frankly, a jewel of the Cactus League. And for all the things that I love to kind of needle the Cubs about, that complex is legitimately stunning. I do have to give them a lot of credit for that. Sorry, Pat, I did not mean to ignore you.
Oh, no, I just
not ignore you, interrupt you, as English would do. God, I'm bad at this.
My soon-to-be high school daughter was entering preschool right after spring training. So, it time flies, right? 10 years is a long time.
It was quite a significant upgrade from their previous facilities. And so
it was Hohokam, which Hohokam was bad because they sold it to the A's. And I can tell you, because Hohokam, like around that time, I think I went to Hohokam like 2 years before Sloan opened, and I had been to Hohokam like a decade before, but I had forgotten sort of what we've come accustomed to in terms of in stadiums, like because all the Giants and Rockies built that Salt River, whatever that thing is, nice stadium, and other teams had really upgraded their stadiums, and it was Hohokam that last time I went there. I was like, wow, this is really a pet. And the fact that the A's took it over might make you think, boy, the A's are really cheap. No. Just the opposite. I was at the stadium the A's were in before Hohokam for a Cubs game. That was the day Junior Lake hit 3 home runs, might add. And let me tell you, the Phoenix Municipal Stadium that they played in which was a stadium I think that the university, that Arizona State had given up on 10 years prior because of the lack of facilities, was so bad. I mean, not bad. It was just it really reminded me of like an A-ball stadium. I mean, it was it had that feel to it. And my dad and I sat in the 10th row behind home plate and watched Junior Lake crank home runs, and we were like sure that he was going to be the next, if not Sammy Sosa, then at least Moises Alou.
Arizona State actually moved back into the Muni, and they currently use that as their home ballpark.
Oh, no. They must have really lost some money on that nil or something. I don't know what happened.
I stopped paying attention to all the different things that Arizona State does for their sports teams. I know they wanted to potentially partner with the Coyotes on an arena for hockey. Didn't end up doing it. It's a whole thing with the Sun Devils. But yes, I can
probably tore down their baseball team and made it a golf course or something. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah. I can verify everything that Pat said about just the levels of stadium. Like the Cubs moved out of Hohokam, which was not state of the art. The A's moved into it, moved out of the Muni, which is definitely not state of the art. There's definitely a lot of different levels at play, but Pat's recollections are precisely correct.
Speaking of Cubs ballparks, they also did some renovations at Wrigley Field as well. Since last we podcasted, the Cubs have unveiled new seating. Are they calling it luxury seating? Is this a luxury area here? This is it's called The Yard in center field, located above the batter's eye, in the area that used to be a walkway.
Semi-private seating, not necessarily luxury seating.
Okay, private seating. Okay.
I think that's about right.
Semi-private. But yeah, that's what they say. I'm reading off their press release. Okay,
so for semi-private seating in the area that used to be the walkway to get from without going all the way around, you could hit. There was concessions right in that area there
to get from left field to right field without having to go back behind the scoreboard, basically. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So new seating. The Yard. Pat, are you going to make it out to the Yard this season?
I'm not, unless someone gives me a free ticket. I did look when they first came out with the pricing. I looked at it and I tried to find the cheapest game of the year, and I ran the math, and it's just not worth it. I was hoping it would be, but it's not. Interesting with the Yard, you sit. I guess the idea is that it's supposed to feel like sitting on the rooftop in the old days in a folding chair, probably, or something. They give you the deal is they give you a hot dog, chips, and cookie or popcorn or something, and then they give you a cooler filled with Budweiser or something, whatever their canned beer is, and or soda probably, and then they'll replenish that, so you just have a big cooler that you can drink beer out of, like you're at a barbecue or something. But there is no barbecue, so you don't get burgers on a grill or anything. That's the Catalina Club, and for your money, do you really want to drink beer out of cans, out of a cooler, or would you rather have it on draft somewhere, in the shade? I don't know what the real allure to it is, other than that it's sort of trying to be like the old school rooftop prefab bleachers when it was just people hanging out in their chairs. So, much like Hohokam, actually, to be honest with you, in the outfield, you used to be able to sit out there and put a blanket out on the hill there and watch the game or whatever. It's more of a gimmick. I'm sure it will probably attract a lot of people in the fraternity sorority venues.
Not our demographic, you're saying?
No.
We're tad out of the demographic?
It's my back. My back is not sure. I got to have a seat. No, but so I'll see it from nearby and check it out sometime. But, it's just a way to score some bucks. And
are you a bleacher guy, Pat?
I sat in the bleachers with you on Juneteenth last year when it was 105 degrees out.
Did.
Thanks very much. Happy birthday,
yes,
everybody.
I had a lot of control over that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. No, I try to sit in the bleachers at least once in April and once in September, and occasionally in late June.
I was going to say we probably average 3 times in the bleachers a year, 3 to 4 times probably.
I used to be about 20 in my heyday, which was the Sammy Sosa, McGuire, and then the years after, right? Like the 95 to 05 period, probably. And so I pretty much went to every Friday bleacher game back then. I did not have children or wife, so I do what I want. Different world, different life. But we sat, so back then the Cubs games were either 1:20 or they did switch to the 3 o'clock Friday games. I don't know if you remember that for a while. So that made it really convenient to work and then go up. And since I lived a block away, I could change clothes and pop over there and stuff. So I don't know, Jeremy, you went to a bunch of those games too, I believe.
I did. I'm never a big I want to get there early guy. Like the bleachers are not for me because I want to get there. Like I could time walking in and sitting down at my seat for first pitch. I knew like I could go straight from Mullins, Dark Horse, Murphy's. I knew exactly wherever I was. I knew how long I had to walk from there to get in my seat for first pitch. So I'm not didn't like I don't care for the bleachers that much. A couple times a year I'm in, but that's
back in those days you did have to get there early too, like an hour early. We used to sit typically in the section just to the first base side of the center field grass or whatever the center field batter's eye is. And so that first section we liked because it was the shortest section, so there were fewer seats, so you didn't have as many people climbing over you. And that famous center field concession stand was right behind us.
Right behind
us. So we could race right up there and get our food and come back. You didn't even miss a single pitch, right? And so we sat there a lot. I was there, I was there for a noon Saturday game, a Fox, TV noon game. And we had to get there at 10:50 or something in the morning. We sat there. It was bloody hot. It was July Saturday. And that was the famous Darryl Kyle game where the game didn't start at noon. And we're just sitting there, 12:20, 12:25. And there were these rumors that there was like a soccer game that was concluding that was on Fox and they had to hold up the start of the game. And I thought, that doesn't sound right. Because that's what they were showing on Fox at the time, to fill the space. And then Joe Girardi famously came out to make the announcement when he was a Cub at the time. And then we all went home. It was the most surreal experience I've had at a ballpark where we sat there for like 2.5 hours before and then into the game. And when they made the announcement, it was very somber, because it was a pretty festive, it was Cubs Cardinals for God's sake. It was a Saturday game. It was pretty festive. Both teams are good. And that really was just like a real, kick in the gut and made the whole baseball thing seem a lot less important at that time.
Yeah, I did not mean to be Buzz Killington on this podcast today. I did not mean
I've got plenty of Buzz Kills for you.
That's
Well, we are Cubs fans, guys. I think that goes part and parcel of the territory here.
Yeah, the Fox broadcasts will continue this season, but the ESPN broadcasts will not. As ESPN, since last we podcasted, they opted out of their deal for Sunday Night Baseball.
Is that effective immediately?
That is. Go ahead, James. What were you saying?
I was going to say I thought they were still airing this year, and I thought the deal ends after this season.
It does. They had their opt out now, so it's at the end of this season. So this will be the final season here, but there's still talks that they are going to continue to negotiate just at a lower price. But they're the current $550 million. They would like ESPN is currently offering $200 million. So they are looking for a significant cut to this deal to keep airing the games.
So I have a question about that. One, I've heard a rumor that the reason why ESPN wants to do this is because they're bleeding on the NBA deal, which they signed like $4 trillion a year or something ridiculous, for a game that no longer resembles basketball and it's just a 3-point contest. Then there's no dribbling or defense involved. And
welcome to our basketball podcast coming up.
I didn't realize this.
Yeah. No, I can go into great depth on this because I'm a 90s Bulls fan, so don't get me started. But I've also heard that, and I think we've talked about this before, that it's more actually indicative of the market in general for baseball on television. And we're seeing RSNs and cable companies balking at wanting to pay money for, carriage fees, et cetera. And the Cubs allegedly, are in that boat too. So maybe it's a combination of both, but it seems like a real big drop in what they're willing to offer.
It definitely is a combination of your NFL and your NBA will get their money and they will get paid, and that's a significant investment.
Well, the NBA gets paid because they signed a contract they can't get out of, right?
Yeah, bingo.
Yeah.
They're stuck on that one. But the NFL and the college football are the ones where they, they're just throwing money left and right.
That's where they've invested. You can choose at this point with where cable carriage fees are now. You can choose a couple of things to invest in, but you can't invest in all of them anymore. And so they've invested there. So they're looking at significant reductions in. I mean, regular season baseball on the national level doesn't draw huge ratings. Playoff baseball draws huge ratings. Everybody wants to get in on the regular season to get the playoff games because that's the big ratings draw. So they are saying it's not worth as much as they're currently paying for their 500 minutes. So they're trying to get that one down. They're going to be negotiating the UFC deal, which is also coming up. They're going to be they're negotiating F1 right now, and F1's looking for more money. They're offering less. So their F1 may be leaving ESPN as well. So there's a lot.
I don't know what F1 is, but it sounds scary. Is that wrestling?
It is not wrestling.
It
wrestling
occasionally.
Is it where the cars go fast, or is it the soccer thing?
Yes. This is racing. This is racing. Not.
We're going to talk about every sport but baseball today. Is this what we're going for here now?
So do you think that the reason why regular season baseball is not a fan favorite do you think they're a victim of the length of the seasoning, 162 games, waters it down so much, or do you think it's more a question of like with football and the NFL in particular, where no one would have any reason to give a damn about a Browns-Bengals game, but for the fact that everybody's got a fantasy football team and they can bet on every single play on their phones?
Jeremy, I wonder if it's something to do with just the sheer number of outlets that have baseball now, where you have games on Roku and Apple TV, and you've got it on Fox, and you've got all of these different packages, and MLB has kind of splintered this all up. And ESPN still has the Sunday night game of the week, and it's this marquee kind of thing in production, but ESPN just very clearly has not been putting the same energy and finance into the show surrounding that with Baseball Tonight and things. I remember when Baseball Tonight used to be the show. I would watch that every single night, and now I cannot tell you the last time I watched it. I think there's that element of it where it doesn't feel special anymore because of that, but I also I get really tired of having to find out each week, okay, I can watch this Cubs game on Marquee, this one on Marquee, this one I have to have
TV.
Amazon Prime, Apple TV, whatever it is. And I know that sounds like a really kind of old fogey-ish argument for me, but look who baseball's primary audience is. You're not catering to your primary audience, and I think that you're seeing the ratings suffer because of that. And I'll also throw out a little caveat here that in the hot take culture world that we live in, where that's ESPN's bread and butter and why they're giving Stephen A. Smith $100 million, I don't want to watch a game where Michael Kay and Alex Rodriguez are the commentators. I just don't. That is not what I am signing up for. And frankly, I'd rather listen to a game on the radio at that point, and frankly have quite often in those situations.
Yeah, I think it's the situation that you describe is only going to get worse as the RSNs struggle, MLB trying to find outlets for some teams going back to broadcast television even. So it's going to, if they're not going to find one suitor who's going to buy the whole package, or two that will buy a combination of the package similar to the NBA, you're going to get a fragmented, a bunch of different people paying for a bunch of different stuff. And the league, part of the next collective bargaining agreement is going to be a restructuring of how they're doing the regional television to fix this problem. And there's going to be it's going to contribute to some of the work stoppage for sure, along with the salary implications and everything after the 2026 season. I believe that MLB is going to take a strong stance on how they think they're going to fix the television deal with the RSN specifically. So it's not going to get any better anytime soon. That's for sure.
Well,
I'm curious.
But I do think the 162 game season does work against individual game interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we watch a lot of Cubs games, or listen to it, or catch part of it. But life goes on, right? If you're some kid at school for your kid's event or whatever, you might check your phone and see what the score is, and you might look at a couple highlights. Jeremy, you used to like that thing where you could watch the whole game in 22 minutes because you would just see the batted balls or whatever.
Love that. Yeah, every ball put in play. Yeah,
or every strikeout or walk. Yeah.
Yep.
And so there are like little cheats like that, but it is kind of in contrast to like the Bears where they have 17 games, and I pretty much, if I don't catch the games, I record them and I'll watch them later. I might watch them on fast forward, and the last couple of years, double fast forward. But if the Bears are a competitive team, I'm not going to miss any Bears plays over the course of the year. I'll see those, some way or fashion, right? And I just think with baseball, it's too much. It's too many. It's 3 hours times 162. That's like not a lot of people have almost 500 hours to give.
No, and it's very regional until the playoffs. Right?
Yes.
Until the playoffs, it's very regional.
And that was another item I was going to bring up, Jeremy, is I'm a lot more likely to watch a random Thursday night football game involving two teams that I have no rooting interest in than I would be to do the same for baseball. And I love baseball. Like, I would say it's my favorite sport. Like, it and hockey are like 1 and 1A, but I'm not watching a random like Angels and A's game on a Thursday night. I'm just not doing it. But if you ask me if I'm going to watch a Rams Raiders game, yeah, I probably would.
Well, and the Rams Raiders game counts 10 times as much.
Bingo.
Right? Because of the shortness of the season.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot to come on this. This is just one of many, and they may end up doing something with ESPN at a reduced rate. But I think
I have heard rumblings that NBC might try to get it and basically swing straight from the Sunday night football, do Sunday night basketball, because they're also going to have the NBA package starting next season, and then have Sunday night baseball on NBC, and just basically do Sunday nights throughout the entire year. You've got primetime sports on those Sunday nights. So as somebody who works for the company, I'm not going to sit here and complain about anything like that. If they want to pick up those rights, I'd be happy to have those under the NBC Universal umbrella. Why not?
It beats my childhood when it was Father Murphy or whatever at nighttime after the NFL games were over, or the medicine woman, whatever her name was. Yeah.
Did you just really blank on Dr. Quinn, medicine woman?
Dr. Quinn, yeah, that's the one. Dr. Quinn. I knew it was a doctor. Yeah. So I would not mind that. I wouldn't mind the sports on NBC. I would especially want the Cubs on marquee to be on Comcast though, because that seems like an important development. And so far we're not there yet, are we?
Yeah, the marquee network. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out with Comcast, as they're going to be changing tiers at some point to the higher tier. How that I don't think we'll ever know how that impacts their bottom line at marquee, as that's a pretty well kept secret. All I know is that I heard it was going to be wheelbarrows of cash, and it was all going to be put back into the product on the field. So
just like all the proceeds from the yard, right?
Hey, you know what? At least it's seemingly closer to a deal than Chicago Sports Network is with anybody, because I have not watched a single Bulls game all season, and I can probably count on the number of Blackhawks games I've watched. They don't get that deal done. I wonder how many tens of people are going to be tuning into White Sox games this spring.
Oof, just brutal.
I got to say, rooting for your teams to tank, but watching all the games too is really a separate level of commitment that it's hard for most people to embrace.
Yeah.
And the Bulls and Hawks are both in that situation simultaneously somehow.
And the Bulls can't get bad enough. They keep trying, and they cannot get bad enough for it. They're in NBA hell.
I watched my first Bulls game last Friday, and they beat Toronto after being down 10 points at 3 minutes to go. I'm like, I thought we were supposed to lose this game. What are we doing?
No, Pat, The new NBA deficits don't matter. They could be down 30, and they'd still have a chance to win. Do not forget this.
Yeah, I know. Some fantastic swings and misses on defense there.
Well, we will finish strong with baseball talk, and then call it a podcast here. As
are you sure, Jeremy? We could talk about a little bit of soccer. You're wearing an Aston Villa shirt right now.
Yes.
How'd they do in their first Champions League game?
Yes, no. Pat will log off if we start talking any sort of soccer. He's barely on a telephone right now. We will lose him immediately if we start talking about if I have to explain the Champions League and how that works during
if you do that, I'm
EPL season.
Shoveling tomorrow's snowstorm. So.
You want me to get Brant Miller on the call here? You can tell everybody how the weather's going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So looking at so I'll throw it to you, James. With looking ahead to the games here in Japan, these are games that count. While it feels like the Cubs are going to have to throw together a roster, the Dodgers are likely to have to be in the same type of position here. So, is this a good time for the Cubs to play the Dodgers of all teams? Get two of those games out of the way here in the weirdness of playing in March in Japan?
The way I've looked at this the whole time, I've been trying to put like kind of a positive spin on it. And I do like when the Cubs are in these kinds of like high profile situations. Like I know that probably isn't going to do much in terms of free agency, but I love like being able to, have them in the marquee position with the Dodgers. And if it helps the international audience at all for the team, then so be it. But then more importantly to me, I love that Shota Imanaga gets to participate in something like this. And so the results are going to be what the results are. Like odds are they'll probably end up just splitting it, and it'll be a whole trip to Japan just to go 1-1 or whatever it's going to be.
Knock on wood.
I'm trying. If they somehow sweep the Dodgers, I would die happy, man, just because it'd be so hilariously weird. But
I'm going to need more than that to die, but okay.
Yeah, I'm very not particular, apparently. I'm looking forward to it just from the perspective of getting into that, like, the big audience for those games, and then also to get Shota Imanaga on that stage. That atmosphere is going to be ridiculous in Tokyo, and I think that's going to be really huge for him and for the Cubs. And if it ends up helping the Cubs to sign another Japanese free agent or two in the coming years, I know they obviously did not get Roki Sasaki or Shohei Ohtani, but if it helps them at all in that area, then more power to it. And I'm just really happy that Shota gets to go do it.
I think there are 3 times when you want to play a very good team. 1, the night of their ring ceremony, because odds are you're going to win. And I've learned that both ways with the Cubs. 2, in a exhibition-esque atmosphere, thousands of miles from the United States in the middle of March would be my second preference, like this. And 3rd would be during a driving monsoon rainstorm or snowstorm, because anything to help equalize the talent differential, any sort of external factor, whether it's emotional or weather related or just the peculiarity of it, goes a long way towards evening things up, I think. So if the Cubs can go 1-1 on this trip, I'd call it a day and regroup for 2 more weeks and try to get Matt Shaw and Horner healthy and get ready to go.
It's just so weird that there's like regular season games and then more spring training games, and then they open up on the road in Arizona and then come home.
They'll come home till April 4th, I think, right?
No, Boys, they open Sacramento Stadium. They play the A's up in Sacramento, the first team to play up there.
Oh, wow.
That's right. Wow.
Yes.
I'd actually like to go to that.
Well, I was going to say, you probably don't want to see what the ticket prices are. The last time I had looked, they were not cheap.
No, it's big Blackhawks playing at the Mullet Arena vibes. Those tickets were always crazy expensive. People would travel for that. But
I haven't been to Sacramento since Cinco de Mayo Day, 1998. I'd like to go back.
Why on earth? Okay, why were you in Sacramento for? I was going to say, like, did you wake up there? Did you deliberately go there? Like,
nope. I was there. I was fully conscious when I got there and when I left. So.
Well, good for you, man.
Thanks.
We'll save that for the Patreon. The Patreon.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't it? Wait, Cinco de Mayo '98. That was the Kerry Wood 20 strikeout game, wasn't it?
May 5th of '98.
I think so.
No, wasn't it '97?
Pretty sure the Kerry Wood game, '98.
You're right. It was '98. But I
bested Pat Nagel on a memory thing. This never happened.
I don't think that was.
Oh, it was May 6th, '98. Was the Kerry Wood.
That's
right. It was the next day.
Yeah,
but you had the right year. You nailed the year.
Yeah.
I didn't. I won't claim that victory. Wait, are you guys? Wait, what are you? What are you celebrating an anniversary of this season? You guys did the 1984 team last year. What's the occasion this time around?
Coming.
Yeah, we will. Here's a teaser for everyone who's listening to the podcast. Who's like, are they going to talk more basketball? No, hang on. We are going to tell you what. If you listen to our last episode,
I've got the first one ready to go.
We had it queued up, so we are going to close this episode here with that topic, and let's get right into it. So,
okay.
And we can get right into it right now. What we're doing this season to celebrate Cubs history, as we are wont to do on this podcast, we are every single week when we have our guest on.
We've done every gimmick we can think of, by the way. We did the uniform numbers. We've done the different years that correlate. Yeah,
we've podcasted since 2013, so we've done a lot of stuff. So now we're thinking, let's showcase a particular Cubs player every single week, and our guest, our former Cub, our guest will get to choose who the Cubs player will be that we will profile the next week. So James, you can start thinking. Your homework assignment right now is to start thinking of who you would like us to profile next episode. So last week, Jared Willis was on the podcast, and he chose as our inaugural Cub to profile here on the podcast. He chose Moises Alou, which is a great choice. One of the Cubs that I enjoyed watching a ton. I enjoyed his career wherever he was at. Pat, I'll hand it over to you to tell us about Moises Alou.
Jeremy, as you know, Moises Alou did not wear batting gloves. We don't have to get into why. What he did in lieu of batting gloves, because it's an all-ages podcast. Moises Alou is famously the son of Felipe Alou, who was the brother to Matty Alou and Jesus Alou. There were three Alous that played Major League Baseball at one time, and in fact, there was at least 1 year when all three of them played for the San Francisco Giants. There's a famous game that took place at Crosby Field in Cincinnati, where the Alou brothers all started in the outfield in the same game. It was the first and so far only time in Major League Baseball history that a trio of brothers started for one team in an outfield. That record may stand forever. I don't see that one going anywhere anytime soon. So Moises Alou came from a rich history of baseball players. He's also, by the way, I bet you didn't know this, Jeremy, he is the cousin to another former Cub, friend of the podcast, Mel Rojas.
Oh,
who, like many Cubs closers of the last several years, kind of imploded when they got him from the Expos, and lasted just a short time. But he was a nice guy. Moises Alou was the second overall pick in the 1986 baseball draft. First round, pick 2. He was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates. Played 17 years of baseball, by the way. But he was often injured. He missed 2 full seasons along the way and missed parts of many more seasons. And I thought it was interesting that he starts off with Pittsburgh. He was traded after batting, I think, twice. He tore through the minors, got hurt, missed a year, came back, and then was traded for Zane Smith, because at the time, and this is talk about perspective in history. This was a time when the Pittsburgh Pirates were so good there was no room for him on the team, because they had Bonds and Bonilla and they had this fabulous team in the early 90s, right? So he was traded to Montreal, which worked out well because his dad was then hired as the manager at Montreal. Moises did not even start in the majors until age 25, due to some injuries he had prior to that. But during his major league career of 17 seasons, do you know he finished second, or 2 times he finished third in the MVP voting, and he finished in the top 20 in the MVP voting 6 times. He was a 6-time All-Star as well. He had a fairly, when he was healthy, he had a fairly good career. In 1993, which was early in his Astros career, or in his Expos career, and this is one of the reasons why it took him so long to kind of get going. He had what I call a Wendell Davis moment, playing at Busch Stadium. Remember the old Busch Stadium in St. Louis that was kind of like an AstroTurf, like track meet facility for Vince Coleman and Willie McGee and others, Lonnie Smith. Alou was, I think he was rounding first base, and he got his ankle caught in a seam on the AstroTurf, and just shredded his ankle, which is one of the reasons many speculate that he lost some of his speed and was never quite the same speed-wise, just like a Bill Buckner hurt his ankle, in the early 70s in a similar injury. There have been players through time who've had to kind of revamp their game a little bit because they've lost speed from injuries. But that aside, when he did finally get a chance to play with the Expos, he was actually fairly good. And he played with the Expos for like about 5 years, including the famous 1994 season when they looked like they were destined to go to the World Series. I think that was one of his the years where he was really hitting on all cylinders. And then they had the labor shortage stoppage, and the season ended, and it was awful for him. I remember Cubs were pretty bad that year, and I remember thinking it was like a mercy killing. I think each team had to vote for whether to walk out or not. And the Cubs voted unanimously just to end the season. But, so he becomes a free agent, and just to show you again, if you asked a young person today, if I was telling you that the Pirates traded him because they were too good, and I then were to tell him that he signed as a free agent with the Florida Marlins, you'd probably be like, what? Florida Marlins? Well, they don't sign free agents. And he got there Forrest Gump style in 1997. And he helped lead them to a World Series championship. He was an all-star. He hit 321 in the World Series itself with a on-base plus slugging percentage of 1.101. Hit 3 homers and 9 RBIs. And basically it was one of the reasons they won the World Series. They didn't get the MVP, but helped them win the World Series. Had 115 RBIs that year. I mean, he was a key player on that team. I think that was the Gary Sheffield team.
Yeah, that team was
Charles
stacked.
Johnson.
Yeah.
That team was stacked. And he was a big cog in that team. He was in his prime, and they won the World Series. And then after the season, remember, Florida decided to
tear it
start
down.
Florida-ing, and they tore down the team, and they traded him along with everybody else, Chuck Finley style, basically for scrap, right? And they were able to, I don't know how, but the Astros managed to get him. Boy, that would have been a great time for the Cubs to get him. He was with the Astros for 4 years. Now, he missed one season completely because he had an injury, tore his ACL in a freak accident at home right before the season started. But in his other 3 seasons with the Astros, and I remember this because as a Cubs fan, of course, we had to deal with this nonsense. Here are his numbers, and you tell me how this stuff. 1998, 2000, 2001. Ready? So, 312, 38 homers, 124 RBIs. 355 average, 30 homers, 114 RBIs. 331, 27 homers, and 108 RBIs. That's pretty good production for 3 years for a contract that was not in today's standards. You'd be like, oh my gosh, that's like Nick Madrigal money, right? Funny note, in 1998, he finished third in the MVP. Do you know who he finished behind in 1998 in the MVP race?
Well, I know who won the MVP that year. Surely. I'm trying to remember who finished second. Sammy Sosa won MVP that year.
Yeah.
Who finished? What, did McGuire finish?
Did McGuire finish second?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if he did or
third.
not. Yeah.
He was third. So rough year to have a great season.
You imagine?
There were some other years when there were plenty of other years when he could have won it otherwise. But anyway, so at the end of his tenure there at Houston, now this is on that contract that he signed with Florida. This was like a 5-year deal. So year 5 is up and he's a free agent again. He signs with us, the Chicago Cubs, 3-year deal, $25 million. Tribune Company was passing out the big bucks for that. Now he was 35 when he started that deal, so he was older now. But the Cubs were desperate to try to find somebody in the lineup who could protect Sammy Sosa. Remember, they had Henry Rodriguez for a while.
Henry.
Grace would hit in front of Sosa, but they needed somebody to hit behind Sosa, or at least to lengthen that lineup. And for as good as Sosa was, and he was at his absolute peak in those years, they just never had like a left fielder bop or two who could like hit 30, 35 homers to really.
Rondell White wasn't the guy.
No, even in the steroid area, they couldn't get that. They couldn't accomplish that, right? So they signed Alou, and we think that's going to be it. Now, all of a sudden, he went from hitting like 312, 355, 331 to hitting like 275, 280, 293 with the Cubs. He did actually make an All-Star game with the Cubs team in 2004. I didn't realize this. He had 293 with 39 homers and 106 RBIs in what is one of the most miserable Cubs seasons of all time, because we had such high expectations and we thought after the 03 season, the 04 was going to, I remember standing like second game of the year, Maddox was, the Cubs got Maddox and Derek Lee, right? To
Derek Lee, that was huge.
So we're standing there. It's the third inning. There's 2 strikes and 2 outs and a man on first, and Maddox is pitching, and the entire stadium is on its feet clapping, right? As if it's the bottom of the ninth. And I'm thinking, I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain this kind of energy all season, but the fans were really hungry. And Alou came through that whole season. Now, unfortunately, Sosa was starting to fade, and we had some other issues, on the team that year. But you can't blame Alou. He did everything he could do that year. But I think what he's probably most famous for was something that happened the year before in 2003. And Jeremy, you and I were both in attendance for this game. Do you remember by any chance Game 6 of the National League Championship Series against the Florida Marlins again, the dreaded Marlins?
Barely.
At the conclusion of the 7th inning, Randy and Dave, Dan, I took a group photo. And, because we wanted to, this is back when you had cameras too, I might add, just to commemorate the day. I called my dad because, those days, especially when you had packed stadiums, et cetera, and people were trying to use their phones a lot, there wasn't, cell service was spotty. It would get spotty. This is flip phone era. This is not like iPhone era. And I called my dad just to kind of share that moment, because I figured that I wouldn't be able to get a hold of him for the rest of the night. And we took our seats, and Mark Pryor gets the first out, gives up a double to Juan Pierre, and then Luis Castillo comes up famously and hits up kind of a soft pop-up fly out down the left field line. And Alou goes over to the stands and puts his glove up into the stands, but not by much, right? It was the brick wall there, the short wall, and a fan who shall remain nameless unwittingly tried to catch the ball as well, and Alou did not catch the ball, and then afterwards made kind of a demonstrative effort to show that he had been interfered with, and to this day will tell you he would have caught the ball. He would have caught the ball, he said. And now as we look back in history, there are some who will say, well, it didn't really matter because, what really ruined the inning was that Alex Gonzalez bobbled what would have been inning-ending double play a couple batters later, and if that had happened, they would have been fine. However, when you really, I looked at that premise because that's been sort of the I think Cubs intelligentsia. That's, the people are trying to be rational about it would tell you that that was the real killer. So I went back through and I thought, okay, let's look at that hypothesis, and then let's look at the opposite. If Alou catches that ball, that is the second out of the inning. Luis Castillo does not walk. There are not two people on. The next batter may or may not have hit a single, but if he did, one run would have scored. And the following batter who hits the ground ball to Alex Gonzalez, I would argue that with a man on first and 2 outs, not needing to rush to try to get a double play, he would have much more likely not bobbled the ball. And even if he had, probably would have gotten a force out at second, because it's just a different, you just know it's just a different scenario when you've got 1 out to get versus when you're trying to get the ball, flip to second, and then throw to first. So had Alou caught the ball, do the Cubs get out of the inning with maybe 1 run scored? Yeah, probably. But they did it. And whether or not it was, the fans' interference ended up costing, or if Alou would have even caught the damn ball anyway. One of the things about Alou is that while he was an extraordinary hitter, his defense was pretty mid. If you look at his career, he had negative WAR on defense. So he's not exactly like a Gold Glover out there. I mean, he makes Ian Happ look like Roberto Clemente in the outfield. So, there's that factor. But it is what it is, and that was too bad. I will note, however, that in the series before, and I think people forget about this, against the Atlanta Braves, again, Alou had a tremendous playoff against the Braves. And one could argue that had he not had such a good series against the Braves, the Cubs may never have even played Florida. He hit 500. He was 10 for 20 against the Braves. 10 for 20 with an OPS of 1.074. I mean, he was on fire. He got on base the entire series. And that was a 5-game series. That was not, we needed a triple by Doug Glanville as a pinch hitter in order to win that series. That was not exactly like an easy win of a series there. So, Alou really did get the Cubs to the NLCS, and unfortunately, it didn't work out in the NLCS. And then after the 2004 season, which he did quite well in, he went to the Giants and Mets and proceeded to finish his career hitting 321, 301, 341, and 347. So it was only those 3 years with the Cubs when he couldn't hit 300, apparently. For his lifetime, he was a 303 hitter. 303 a lifetime average. You may not see too many more players in your lifetime retire with those numbers. His OPS was 885, and you might say, well, it was the steroid era. Okay, his OPS plus was 128. So even in the era, he was an exceptional hitter, right? And yet when it came time for Hall of Fame balloting, he got 1.1% on the first ballot. And this is somebody who was never accused of or speculated to have used steroids or anything like that. So, it was kind of a poor showing in the Hall of Fame. But some have suggested that had he not missed 2 full seasons, especially in his prime when he was 24 and 27, and had he not missed, 50 games here and 30 there. I mean, he only played 140 games, 5 of the 17 seasons, right? So he was always hurt at some point. You probably, if you give him, say, 400 more games in his career, and you look at his lifetime numbers, that the counting numbers really start to add up after a while. And he may not have been a Hall of Fame player, but he'd be one of those guys that is in the conversation the way a lot of these like Abreu is and people like that. You wouldn't just dismiss it offhandedly. I think you'd consider him to be one of those, strong candidates who may or may not be Hall of Fame worthy, but at least deserves the recognition of being close.
Alou is among only 10 players in MLB history to have 300 home runs, a 300 batting average, and 100 stolen bases.
Yeah. And imagine if instead of 300 home runs, he had 375, because he played, more of those prime years, then you're really starting to push that, the next, I bet you the list of people with 350 homers and a 300 batting average is pretty small, et cetera, et cetera. So, there are a lot of guys who have always been kind of these close but no cigar types, and he'd have been a lot more of a candidate for that. But an impressive career nonetheless. Comes from an impressive baseball family. His Cubs years were, he had one excellent year and two, decent years, and helped the Cubs win their first playoff series since 1907. So, that's not bad, right? And that is
important during the first Cubs success. After a long time, it was he was a key contributor to that success.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that. So what do you have for us, James, on your front now? Who are we?
All right, James. Yeah, pressure's on you now. Moises Alou is off the board. Who would you like us to profile next on next week's podcast?
So I hate the idea of going back to the well on a player who shared a team with Moises Alou, who is on the roster. But ever since they announced the Cubs Hall of Fame inductees for this year, of course, everybody is talking about Sammy Sosa and the incredible career, of course, that he had and the welcome back to the organization and all of that. And that is, rightfully so. I grew up with Sammy Sosa doing the things that he did. I was 13 years old in the 1998 season. So those are a lot of very formative Cubs memories for me. But throughout this entire thing, after the Hall of Fame announcement and after they said who they're going to have be in that Hall of Fame, I feel like Derek Lee is getting very short shrift with that.
Yes.
That 2005 season that he had is quite possibly, it's up there among the best single Cubs seasons that we've ever seen. Just the numbers, if you go back and look at the numbers for 2005, were completely outrageous. That was the first season that I really had the job where I got to kind of spend my own big boy money on going to a lot of games. I went to, I think, a dozen Cubs games that season, which was almost as many as I'd been to my entire life. I basically only went to one Cubs game a year growing up. And that season, the Cubs were not very good. And so the tickets were extremely cheap. StubHub had really kind of come into use around that time. And so just time and again, I would find tickets for $2 and go sit in the bleachers or go sit in the 100 level or whatever it was. And just throughout that season, I was just dazzled and mind blown at how incredible of a year Derek Lee was having. And so if you guys will indulge me on your next episode, I would love you to pay tribute to number 25 and who will be joining the Cubs Hall of Fame in 2025, Mr. Derek Lee.
Yes, please. Great choice. I'm excited to talk Derek Lee because he is one of my all-time favorites. Really
one
looking
of
forward to
all
that.
of our all-time favorites. Mine too. I remember I remember the base hit he hit into right field in that game, that inning. By the way, I'm thinking that's what we need on our team, and sure enough, we ended up getting him. It was nice, but he put up some fantastic seasons for the Cubs, and we'll. I don't want to spoil it all, so we'll get into it.
No, we'll save it. But it definitely tells us. I mentioned it when they announced the Sosa and Derek Lee Cubs Hall of Fame entrance. That it tells you how quickly the Sosa thing came together. Because if they were actually planning this out, you would have done Aramis Ramirez with Derek Lee, and you would have done Sammy kind of on his own to not overshadow everything. So I think because it came together so quickly.
I guess we're just going to do the 04 Cubs now this year. That'll be fun.
Like I said, I didn't want to. I really
No.
looked at guys from the 97, 98 team because those were one of the first teams I really remembered. But Derek Lee just immediately came to mind as somebody worthy of celebration, truly.
So Thanksgiving weekend 2003, I'll just give you a quick prelude into this, was the last time and maybe the only time I ever called into the score. And I did it at about 9:30 at night. Might have been a Saturday, might have been a Friday. I remember Thanksgiving weekend. Peggy Kozinski was doing an overnight show, like one of those solo guest shows. And the news broke. The Cubs had traded Troy and someone else. Marlins did with Moises Alou to Houston. And after '97 championship, after the '03 championship, they were also dismantling their team, and we were the recipients this time of their poor decision making. And several callers called in to say that it was a terrible trade because Hesop Choi could be the real deal, blah blah blah. And I got so fed up, I broke my promise to myself. And by the way, I am now 22 years. I have my 22-year chip of not falling into the score. So, it was a moment of weakness, but it was holiday season. So I called in to explain that he had a higher OPS than anyone on the Cubs, including Sammy Sosa the year before, and that this is ridiculous and that you're all idiots. And that was my contribution to the show. And Peggy seemed to take it in stride. And I don't know if the callers were paying attention or not, probably not. But I do need to get that off my chest. So yes, next time we will do a Derek Lee presentation. I think that's an excellent
great
choice.
pick. Looking forward to it. Yes, this will be great. So, and if there's a week where we don't have a guest, then we are going to turn to our Patreon subscribers over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation to nominate a player for us to profile. So if you want to support the show,
or if we have a really bad guest who makes a bad choice, but they're not going to come back on again, we can probably do the Patreon thing too, right?
We can Patreon can always overrule. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm really glad I didn't pick Lyndon Rush then.
Yeah.
And so, if you want to support the show, it's how we keep the show ad-free for yet another season is because of all of the folks that support us over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. We thank all of our supporters there. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. James, please remind our listeners how they can find your work and follow you on the social media platforms.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. You still find my work at NBC Chicago. I cover basically everything today. I wrote about everything from the Small Business Administration to the Chicago Bears to, Bill Murray being on Hot Ones today. So there's so many different stories that I cover at NBC, and we have so many unique products that are to be coming out this year, like unique new shows, podcasts, and everything. So definitely check us out. And then in terms of social media, I am no longer on the platform formerly known as X. I have said sayonara to that. But if you want to keep up with my misadventures and my apparently limitless desire for a tasty porter or an IPA, you can find me on Instagram. My username is Neveau Riche, NEVEAURICHE. And that is the best place to find me on the social media landscape nowadays. I suppose I'm also on Blue Sky too. If you really want to follow me on Blue Sky, I think I'm just at James Neveau. Very, very simple username on that one.
And on Untapped, if we want to follow your,
I cringe to know how many beers I have checked into, but yes, you can find me on Untapped as well.
You can find us on all the social media platforms as well at Wrigleyville Nat. And don't forget that we've also got the video version of this podcast. You can find that over at youtube.com. Search for Wrigleyville Nation Podcast. And make sure you, even if you don't consume your podcast via the video medium, you prefer the audio, that's fine. We're on every podcatcher of choice. But when you go over there and throw us the likes and subscribes over there, it helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. So we really, really appreciate it. We launched it last year, it's been a big success for us, so we want to continue to spread the word about that, and we rely on your support to do it. So with that, we are going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.